This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
Welcome to the BiCurean podcast, where we explore and embrace the seeming contradictions of life. What actually is BiCurean, you ask?
While you may not necessarily have a mental concept of BiCurean, partially maybe because it's a made-up word, you embody it. What's happening right now in terms of the divisions between us is a focus on that which is different.
And lack of understanding and empathy for people's beliefs is no longer an excuse.
And it is in the differences we carry in ourselves that we find the BiCurean moment.
When you really dig into something, you're going to see some depth to it. It's not just a race thing. It's not just a conservation thing.
It's letting go of the or to make room for the and. We embrace all of you. Welcome to the BiCurean.
Hi, I'm Aicila.
And I am Erik. Welcome to the show.
And today, we are going to talk about festive things. So Erik and I had a conversation about what show we're going to have today. And shockingly, I wanted to do something super serious. And he was like, let's be festive.
So why not both?
We'll see how this goes.
So in all seriousness,
But festively.
Festively serious.
Thank you, yes.
One of the things that had come up and the timing of the show being around Christmas, we decided we wanted to talk about Christmas. I don't want to be a downer, but I really feel like, much like the topics that we've covered recently, like impeachment and that sort of thing, people don't really know about some of the things that we just do every year. And so I just thought it'd be fantastic to look at what Christmas has been. Because I think we can all pretty much agree that the version of Christmas that we all sort of celebrate now is a modern version that started much like so much of our home life and things like that, just this 1950s mid-century modern concept. Christmas is something that if depending on your age, might be something you remember, 8mm tapes of kids running around in the snow. But really beyond that, what was Christmas like? And maybe maybe you've had some experience around it, but we did some research and we wanted to talk about it.
Yes, exactly. And
so it doesn't have to be unfestive.
right.
But I think a lot of people are going to be surprised about how different it was, even fairly recently.
No, I definitely found some things that were really interesting, and some of them aren't surprises. They won't be surprises to you all. They weren't surprises to us. And then there were some that were really in kind of intriguing. So let's just start with, I don't know, what should we start with? Maybe I kind of want to start with Saturnalia. That's one that I think is really fun.
Saturnalia.
Do you know what that is?
That's Christmas?
Kind of, yeah. So it's the Romans that, they celebrated Christmas. Not really. They celebrated Saturnalia. And it was a festival that had a lot of the aspects of modern Christmas because it fell around the same time, but it was a more temperate climate than the European.
So they weren't probably, the Romans were not celebrating the long, hard, dark winter and the longest night, the rebirth of the snow melting and spring coming. That makes sense.
Yeah, not as much.
Italy's fairly nice all the year long.
There was the solstice part. So,
well, of course. So let's start by just stating that all modern Christmas is based on, and ancient Christmas was based on the solstice. I think it's pretty safe to assume that, regardless of your beliefs from a Christian point of view, these things got lumped.
They got pushed together, like the rebirth of the season, that short day, the symbol of that ritual was sort of translated into the Christian
right.
pantheon.
And we're not here to debate it, although many biblical scholars have spoken that the actual birth of Christ was unlikely to be in December.
Yeah, it was more likely to be the spring because of the birth of the lambs and such like
right.
that. Yeah.
And the shepherds, one of the key things I've always heard, the shepherds were out in with their flocks. And even in Israel, that's not something you do in the dead of winter.
Right,
So,
yeah.
So let's, I think one of the key things a lot of people don't necessarily get is that Christmas, ancient and modern, was and always has been around the solstice and celebrated as such. So Saturnalia.
Yeah. So I thank you for that historical context. And I was really wanting to talk about the hedonism of it. And so, because I just love this, that the Saturnalia was, it's named in honor of Saturn, the god of agriculture. And apparently he was a partier. And so there was like food and drink.
Satyrs, the word satyrs comes from that, by the way.
Carnivals, and the other thing that was really interesting is the normal Roman social order was turned upside down. And for an entire month, the slaves would become masters. Peasants were in command of the city. Business and schools were closed so everyone could join in on the fun. And then additionally, at the same time, around the solstice, the Romans observed Juvenalia, a feast honoring the children of Rome. And during that, the members of the upper classes were celebrating the birth of Mirtha, the god of the unconquerable sun, on the 25th. And it was believed that Mirtha, an infant god, was born of rock. And so for some Romans, that was like a very sacred day. And then you see the 25th of December, there's a like a connection.
Right.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But I just really wanted to also bring in that like party festive atmosphere that we don't really have in modern Christmas, and we'll get to that. There's some stuff going on around it.
And it's safe to assume that this time of year, cultures since recorded history have been celebrating in some way. And we find that historically that there's been a lot of things around the equinoxes and solstices. That's in some ways when people talk about pagan ritual, that's usually what they tend to be talking about.
Right. And interestingly, so initially Christians did not celebrate the birth of Christ. That wasn't considered to be a particularly important thing to focus on. Christians celebrated his sacrifice. And so the Easter was the really big deal celebration for Christians. And Puritans, who were very anti-Christmas, actually,
right,
point out that the Bible didn't have a birth date, kind of to say, yeah, that's not really the important thing.
Right.
And then it was added, let's see, they started celebrating it in Europe around, and by the Middle Ages, it became sort of more common. And a lot of the pagan things around the solstice and the Saturnalia were then kind of adopted into Christmas. And so there was a carnival that occurred that was a lot like Mardi Gras. So that reminds you of the Saturnalia thing, where there's a lot of partying and drinking. But they would do one student or a beggar who would become the Lord of Misrule. I love this idea. And then all the other celebrants would be the Lord of Misrule's subjects. And they would go to the wealthy and they would demand their finest food and drink. And if the noble or the wealthy people did not give it to the Lord of Misrule and the celebrants, then they would be terrorized with mischief, according to this little thing.
Sounds more like Halloween. Right. Trick or treat.
It sounds like it does, right? Like, and so it became a time of year when the upper classes could repay their real or imagined debt to society by entertaining less fortunate citizens. And so there's some of that aspect, that you see in the sort of service aspect or the gift, the generosity aspect that people have around Christmas.
Yeah.
The Christmas spirit is supposed to be one of like caring for those in need.
Right.
But we've left out the fun Lord of Misrule, which I really feel like we need to make that come back.
We really have. So what I'm hearing is that the pagan versions of these holidays, and even into times when there was Christianity was spreading, it sounds like it was always a festive time of year in one form or another.
Well, yes, until Cromwell, who we love, right, Mr. Puritan.
Yeah, he did some things.
He canceled Christmas. He was like the Scrooge
very fitting
of
based on the
country,
stories
right?
that I've heard of him.
And so when Charles II was reestablished on the throne, he restored Christmas in 1645, But the Pilgrims who came to America were Puritans, right? And so they were kind of like not so into the Christmas festivities. It was actually outlawed in Boston for almost 20 years, from 1659 to 1681. Like it was literally illegal
Yeah.
to celebrate Christmas in Boston. Boston people, remember this.
So, yeah, the history of Christmas to me is fascinating because, again, everybody has it off these days. Like,
Do you know when that started?
I would guess not that long ago.
Well, I told you earlier something. Do you remember that? Or, I mean, because before I read this, I would have thought that it was kind of like...
Well, Saturnalia, so they would close for a whole month.
Yeah, but it's a day here.
Yeah.
And it started in 1870.
Yeah, interesting.
It's like it hasn't been a legal holiday in our country for that long, considering the way that we like... When it's one of the things that you think about, when you think about generations... Like, as you know, I talk about raising kids. And one of the things I realized is that when your kids are little and you do something, honestly, more than twice, they think of it as a tradition.
Right.
They can ask for. So I would do something one year and then I might do it the next year. And then after that, I kind of had to do it every year. And for them, not only was that something that happened their whole lives,
yes,
but they kind of think of it as something that has always existed for throughout time and eternity, right?
Well, and that's so, I'll tip my hand a little bit. I've known that modern Christmas, what we celebrate right now, is barely 150 years old, even close. And even when it was coming back, you can look at when Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol. He intentionally, there's a reason why that story is actually very secular. It's spiritual. There's ghosts, obviously, and things like that. But, there's the famous lines, God bless us, everyone, and stuff. It's a very secular story.
It really is. It doesn't have the trappings of a particular religion. It has a spirit of human kindness and generosity.
Which is what he was going for.
Right.
He was really trying to convince people to be more worldly in a giving way and showing that it wasn't too late to turn that around. And I think, there's a reason why there's 100 versions of that and you're going to see it, and then, in more modern times, It's a Wonderful Life, same kind of a thing, what can you do that's good? So it became, the messaging even in modern Christmas became, how can you be better? And so in a lot of ways, again, not here to argue the merits of Christianity versus non-Christians, the put Christ back in Christmas is really a misnomer because aside from midnight mass and the Catholic Church kind of bringing that in again modern times, there was never really Christ in Christmas, even from a religious standpoint.
Yeah, it was an expression, a celebration, but the focus of Christ was really about Easter.
Right.
And the other thing that was interesting to me in reading about this, like when you're talking about the Christmas Carol and Dickens, and in that they talk about in the history of Christmas documents that I was reading, Americans were sort of taking all of these different pieces, including the story of the Christmas Carol, to kind of invent, and it's a very American thing to do, a new holiday that had all of these bits and pieces from different religions, different immigrant groups that had come bringing to kind of focus on the family, to reorient this holiday towards a time, because they were coming from a time when families were very harsh on children, and we were kind of going into an age of being a little bit more nurturing towards our children and less like harshly disciplining. And Christmas became a way...
I would say the Victorian era probably. The shifts in the Victorian era can literally be traced to kind of where the modern Christmas has come from.
No, that's exactly what they say. And in this like little history that I was reading, and some of it was also that they were trying to find ways to sort of justify being a little more gentle and generous with their children. Yeah. And Christmas became a great way to celebrate that. And so I just thought that was kind of really intriguing, because we live in a very soft world in a lot of ways. We are all yeah, I shouldn't say all, but there's definitely a cultural inclination towards helicopter parenting. Like, and so we don't need to look for excuses to be gentle and nurturing, but if you think about the context of what those families were in, and the roles that children had. I mean,
Yeah.
children worked at a very young age and had large responsibilities. And so this was a way to justify shifting a little bit, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah. So I think it's all terribly interesting. I love learning about history and things like that. And I don't know if our listeners do this, but for me personally, when I learn some of this history, it does make me appreciate things in a different way. I watch Christmas Carol every year, and it is nice to have a little bit of a reminder that being generous and gentle could benefit you. Like, I'm not trying to save myself like Scrooge was at the end, you know. The implication is that he's not going to die if he gets nicer. Really, I think the implication was that somebody would care about him so he wouldn't die at a younger age,
Yeah.
because he'd have somebody that cares about him. But it has always struck me that, I enjoy my family year round, but, Christmas, it's nice because everybody stops for a minute and we all make time for each other and we make the plans that we do, and it doesn't feel like a burden. And it's nice because we're all off of work, so it's not like we have to cancel any plans to make new plans. But, yeah, just my take on it.
I think especially in modern America, it's so important to have what you were talking about, like that time to stop. I do. My personal feeling is that modern American life is really quite unhealthy. That we don't, people blame cell phones and screens and all of that, and it's just that's not even the beginning of it. There's just not room for people to be human. Like if they get sick, they have to like drug up and go to work. If they, if they're trying to pay their bills, a lot of times they have to work 3 jobs. We don't necessarily have people to take care of our parents when they're ill. Like there's just not a lot of space for it, the yin, if you will. Like if the life of balance is yin and yang,
Yeah.
America's all yang. We're all action. We're all external. We're all movement. And the reality is that we need both. We need some of that quiet time. We need to be internal. We need to be able to go away from the hustle and bustle of things and just be.
Absolutely.
We can't always do. Sometimes we need to be. And what I love about Christmas is that it is a time when it is actually acceptable to stop and be.
Yeah. And I'm often reminded of this. I don't necessarily need the reminder all the time, but I get it every year. As a day job, I am an account manager and I manage accounts around the world. Interestingly enough, I don't have any accounts that are in like Eastern areas, philosophical areas. I work with accounts in westernized countries from like Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. And the one thing in common that we don't have here is these are large companies, sometimes very, very large companies. And to the last one, they all generally have a week or 2 off around Christmas. That's what they do for their employees every year.
Yeah.
That is, it's European, it's Australian, New Zealand. We have a day, maybe 2 with the eve and stuff. But make no mistake, it's another one of those areas, yes, in Europe and Australia, they get a month of vacation at a time. And they generally get a week or 2 off around Christmas just because the company just shuts down.
Yeah. And there's occasionally a groundswell of people who have different, either they're agnostic or not Christian. And they're like, why do we celebrate Christmas? And I feel so strongly that we need to I wish we had a few more national holidays. I think a week would be fantastic. I think 1 day a quarter would be a great beginning that everybody just had off. And I don't care what day it is. I mean, I'm not Christian, and I'm totally great with it being Christmas. And I have a Christmas Eve party every year that I've had since I was 16. And I invite 120 people to stop at my house for fondue, and it's a wonderful tradition. It's full of joy.
Yeah.
And to me, in more of that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, I think in American culture, the holidays we have are the holidays we have. Like Thanksgiving, secular holiday, Memorial Day, Labor Day. Most countries don't have that. They've built a structure where we have a pretty decent amount of days off for holidays, not weeks off, but most of them are secular. A lot of them are around the country. 4th of July, and Christmas. It's a good time to take off. Like I'm never sad about it. I'm not particularly a Christian either, but I think in some ways that's why it was striking to me, like that Christmas Carol is a secular thing. Many people, whether you're religious or not, celebrate Christmas. And it's why I think it's a great holiday, because you can make it mean what you want. Frankly, if you want Christ in Christmas, do it.
Yeah.
There's plenty of ways to do that as a part of a group, and your church is likely doing something. If you are into the family and some gift giving and a big meal and watching some football or whatever, that's there too. Whatever you want it to be, you can have it. And I think that's the magic of modern Christmas, is that, eh, it's got some downsides. It's become very commercial. I mean, a few weeks ago we had Black Friday sales, some of the biggest numbers in sales ever. A lot of people save their big purchases for that because you will get a genuinely better deal. But aside from the commercialism of it, we've done pretty good at making it a good holiday, even based on how you want it to be celebrated.
Yeah. Well, and additionally, there are a lot of holidays, like you said, around that time for different religious groups. And I think that that's also really fantastic in terms of saying, for me, even though I'm not religiously there, Christmas is fine. Like I can embrace it for the cultural aspects and for the secular spirit that exists. For some people, there's maybe too much pain connected to the past, or maybe they are from a different ethnic group or a diverse religious background, and so they want to celebrate Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or solstice. And because of the timing, like I think it's really possible to do that. And if we had a week off, it'd be even more possible,
Right?
And then there'd be just a lot more possibility for everybody to get to express what's happening for them. And that's another thing that I always do a PSA around Christmas. I usually do it on my Facebook page, but I'm gonna take the power of the mic today.
Do it.
To say, that, for a lot of us, Christmas is a celebration time. We have friends and family and holiday people, traditions that we want to engage in. And then for people, it's not. There are some people for whom it's really painful, either because of the loss of a loved one or struggles they're going through, whether it's financial struggles or family struggles or just personal struggles. Maybe they don't like people and they find it to be oppressive to have to talk to people all the time and pretend they're feeling cheerful.
Yeah.
And so I just ask people to remember that there's no wrong way to go through the holiday. And if you are someone who wants to be out and be at lots of parties and invite a lot of people over and have a big open house, great. And if you are someone who wants to retire and be at home and not talk to anyone for 3 days, that's also great. And if you have the space to include someone in your celebration and you think there are people around that could benefit from that invitation, that they might want to be connected, but they don't know how to ask, just, put it out there gently. Don't feel like people are, rejecting you if they say no, but make that space for those who are alone and don't want to be, and respect the people that want to be alone and are having what they need. Because there's so many ways to be in this world, and especially at a time where people are so focused on the joy and the wanting things to be good. Sometimes it can be easy to overlook the people who are struggling or for whom maybe that's not their way, and that's not bad. They get to be there.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
that's my invitation and my PSA for this
said.
year. I thank you.
And I will take it one step further and say, whether Christmas is your holiday or a different holiday, whatever you are celebrating at this time of year, May you have peace and joy. And here's to looking towards a new year on the horizon. So,
Yeah. Happy holidays and joy and peace to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm RJ Metzger.
And I'm Rachel Metzger.
And we're the Skeptical Skeptics.
Each week we talk about all the crazy things in the world, ranging from the paranormal to Bigfoot to UFOs.
And we look at it from the perspective of the believer, the skeptic, and everything in between.
So come check us out on the MSC Podcast Network.
Or go to skepticalskeptics.com and follow us at SkepSkepPod on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
welcome back to the show. So, this is our BiCurean moment.
Yes.
And it's your turn.
I am really excited. So I'm apparently really behind the times, which I think you already knew that.
It happens on occasion with you. We get used to it. You're really up on some things.
Yeah, it's interesting what I do.
Good trade.
But I grew up on the Lawrence Welk show. So I bet you don't even know what that is.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, no, look it up, everybody. A friend of mine once said I was 80 when I was like 17, and they probably weren't wrong. However, what I want to talk about today is something I learned about last week, which apparently has been going on since 2008.
Huh.
Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg are BFFs.
Yes.
And they're making a reality show called, let's see, the Martha and Snoop's. I mean, I just love that. Martha and Snoop's potluck dinner party. There's a little play on that because he's always bringing pot into it. And she's always bringing...
He's a fan of the reefer.
He's a fan, apparently. And apparently it's hilarious. And what brought it up for me was there was this video of them reenacting that scene from Ghost where he was behind her doing something like kind of sensual and holding her hands with this turntable of a chocolate cake she was frosting.
Huh.
And I was like, what did I just see? And then I watched it repeatedly. And then I started stalking them on the internet and found out that he was on the Martha Stewart show in 2008 for, I really have no idea what reason. And since then, they've been great friends and decided to do this show together because they're polar opposites, literally.
You would assume. I've actually, from what I've seen, Martha Stewart's probably a pretty interesting person. She's one of the few people and been to jail and still considered a powerhouse in the homemaking demographics.
I think no, she's definitely. I'm not saying she's not interesting. It's just that the brand she created for herself and the brand that Snoop Dogg created for himself were very not the same.
Yeah.
Right. And that's for me, the BiCurean moment is the delight in the fact that they are clearly both able to get past the idea of what things are supposed to be to find a connection. And apparently I haven't seen it. Having seen that video, I'm 100% confident it's hilarious. And I feel the need to watch it. I'm
going to have to check it out. I do. I agree with you. I think one thing, and I actually give Snoop some credit for this. He's turned up in some interesting places. He is fairly philanthropic, and he is also a pretty good guy, and he's funny, and he turns up, and he likes to be involved in different things. I think they're both a credit to not assuming, like you said, not assuming that there needs to be stereotypes. Even in the way that you would present yourself if you're famous, like the assumption that you might be looked down upon by somebody for associating with, each other. And they don't care, and they're having fun with it. I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, my exposure to Snoop Dogg over the years has been that, I've known him personally because I'm not that lucky, but I just have a lot of respect for how he shows up in the world. I think that he's, really created some great things. And yeah, so, and Martha Stewart, honestly, I didn't have the same respect for her. This makes me respect her more. And only because I was a housewife when she was popular. And so there was a lot of weird pressure that came filtered out from her shows
Yeah.
to like be perfect. And so I kind of love that, you know, she's kind of shifted a little bit. There's a little less pressure for perfection. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm
I think it
curious-
is great.
I'm curious about what your BiCurean moment is.
Well, as this episode is around the holidays, my BiCurean moment was actually to look at the new year. I'm very big at kind of looking at the opportunity for the rebirth that is the new year, which works out for me, you know, 50-50. There's plenty of, I'm going to work out more that never happens. But there's also other things. And one of the things I'm really excited about is where we've ended up with the show. You may have noticed at the beginning of this episode a reference to Big Heads Media, which we have just joined their podcasting group. They're basically a great organization pulling in a lot of talented podcasts, and we're really honored to be a part of that. And so, very fittingly, our first episode that's now officially on that network is coming out around New Year's. So that feels very telling and fortuitous to me of where we're going to go. We're going to have a lot of support, but we're not going to change the show. You might hear some ads once in a while, and realistically, that's because people are seeing that what we're doing is good, and I really appreciate that they think we're worthy of having a medium to share more information about the other shows that we enjoy on this network. And the other thing that we started recently was Glow, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's similar to some of the other models out there where you can get direct support from folks. So it allows you to, you know, set up payments or make donations to us. And we're really happy to see that we've been getting some attention on that. It just feels like a really positive time for BiCurean, our podcast, the work that we're doing, and the fun that we're having with all of it.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And I'll just say that the listener support program that we're doing through Glow, we're really hopeful that we'll get enough people to sign up, that we can do more content, that we can put together we have a lot of ideas for some specialty shows and for some series that we want to do, like some deeper dives in. And frankly, we can't do it right now.
Right. We are currently in a state where we have to have day jobs, but the less priority we have to put on that, the more content we want to do. But it's exciting because all of this is happening because our listeners that are already listening, and the people that are listening to this show right now,
That's
have
you.
You've already helped us get to the point where these are next steps for us. So
Thank you.
thank you so much. I can't say thank you enough. And I'm just excited. It's a new year and we've got some new things coming, and it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Erik. And thanks for listening. Join our mailing list at bit.ly/BiCure, and we will send you episodes and blogs right to your inbox about twice a month. You can learn more about us at BiCurean.com/podcast.
And if you like what we are doing, please rate us favorably on your listening platform of choice.
Thank you.